You know that feeling when you share something precious with someone and they look at you like you've lost your mind? That empty stare, that polite nod, that silence that makes your heart sink. You offer them gold, and they saw dust. Listen, before we go any further, if this resonates with you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video, and leave a comment telling me which of these 5 things you've learned the hard way not to share. Because I promise you, by the end of this conversation, you're going to understand why some of your deepest truths must remain silent in certain company. And trust me, this isn't about being superior. It's about being wise. I spent my entire life in Königsberg, never traveled more than 25 miles from where I was born. People thought I was provincial, narrow, but here's what they didn't understand. I traveled further in my mind than most people ever will in their bodies. And in those travels, I learned something crucial. Not everyone is ready for the journey. There's a difference, you see, between someone who's merely awake and someone who's spiritually awake. One person opens their eyes in the morning. The other opens their soul. And that difference? It's everything. So let me tell you about the first thing you should never share with someone who isn't spiritually awake: your deepest transformations. Imagine you've been living in a dark cave your entire life. Every day, shadows dancing on the walls. That's all you know. Then one morning, you find the exit. You walk out. The sun hits your face. Colors explode everywhere. The sky, the trees, the infinite horizon. Your whole body trembles because you finally understand you've been living in darkness, calling it light. Now you run back to the cave, breathless, desperate to tell everyone. Come out. There's a whole world out there. And what do? They look at you suspiciously. They shake their heads. Some even turn away in disgust. We're fine here, they say. You're the one who's lost. That's what happens when you share your transformation with someone who isn't ready. Last year, maybe you were drowning in anxiety. Your mind was a prison. Then something shifted. Maybe you started meditating. Maybe you had a moment of clarity so profound it shattered your old way of seeing. Maybe you finally forgave someone or forgave yourself, and suddenly the weight you'd been carrying for decades just lifted. You're different now, lighter, more present. You don't react the same way to things that used to destroy you. And you want to help others feel this way. So you share. You tell your friend, your sister, your coworker. And they smile that smile. That patient, patronizing smile that says, "That's nice for you," but what they don't say is, "I'm not ready to admit I'm in a cave." Because to accept your transformation is to acknowledge their stagnation. And that's terrifying. I learned this from my own life. I was raised by deeply religious parents. Simple people. My father made saddles. We had nothing, but they had faith, and that faith gave them dignity. When I later questioned everything they believed, when I tried to rebuild morality on reason alone, I couldn't share this with them. Not because they were stupid, because they weren't ready for the foundation of their world to crack. Here's the second thing you must keep quiet: your intuitive knowing. You ever just know something? Not because someone told you. Not because you read in a book. You just know, deep in your bones. Like when you meet someone, and within 5 minutes you know exactly who they are. Not their job or their hobbies. Their essence. Their wounds. Their gifts. And you're never wrong. Where you wake up one morning, and you know you need to leave your job. No logical reason. No plan. Just absolute certainty that staying would be a betrayal of your soul. That's intuitive knowing. And it's real. It's as real as your breath. But try explaining it to someone who lives entirely in their head. Try telling them, "I just know," and watch them demand proof, logic, reasons, evidence. They'll make you doubt yourself. They'll say you're being irrational, impulsive, foolish. Because here's what they don't understand. There's a kind of knowing that comes before thinking. A deeper intelligence. Your body knows things your mind hasn't figured out yet. Your soul recognizes truth faster than your brain can process it. I called this the categorical imperative in my work. This inner moral law that doesn't need justification. It simply is, but most people haven't learned to hear it yet. They're too busy arguing with themselves, analyzing, doubting, seeking external validation. When you share your intuitive knowing with them, you're speaking a language they don't understand. And instead of admitting that, They'll try to convince you the language doesn't exist. The third thing you should never tell someone who isn't spiritually awake: your experience of oneness. Maybe you were walking in nature, the trees, the wind, the sound of a stream, and suddenly, you weren't separate anymore. You weren't looking at the trees. You were the trees. The boundary between you and everything else dissolved. For a moment, or an hour, or a day, you experienced what mystics have been trying to describe for centuries. We are all one. Or maybe it happened in meditation, or holding your child, or in a moment of profound grief when your heart broke so completely that the walls around it crumbled, and you felt connected to every person who'd ever suffered. This experience is sacred. It's transformative. It's the truth that every great spiritual tradition points toward. But when you try to explain it to someone who's still locked in their separate self, in their ego, in their story of me versus them, they'll think you're on drugs. I'm serious. They'll laugh. They'll say, that's a nice feeling, but it's not real. Because for them, separation is real. The ego is real. Competition is real. Your differences are real. The idea that we're all connected, that consciousness itself might be one field experiencing itself through billions of perspectives. That's just hippie nonsense. But you know what you experienced. You know that for those moments, the truth revealed itself, and you can't unknow it. It changed you. You're more compassionate now, more patient, less attached to being right. Because how can you attack another when you've felt them inside your own heart? Don't waste this experience on someone who'll diminish it. Protect it, honor it, and wait for the rare person who says, yes, I felt that too. The fourth thing you must never share: your understanding of suffering as a teacher. This one's dangerous, because when you say, my suffering taught me, people hear, suffering is good, and they get angry, defensive. They think you're romanticizing pain or justifying injustice. But that's not what you're saying at all. You're saying, I went through hell, depression, loss, betrayal, illness, loneliness so deep I didn't think I'd survive. And in that darkness, something unexpected happened. I met myself, the real me, not the performance, not the mask, the raw, broken, beautiful truth of who I am. I learned what matters. I learned what doesn't. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined and more fragile than I wanted to admit. I learned that running from pain only makes it chase you, but turning toward it, sitting with it, letting it transform you, that's where wisdom lives. Your suffering initiated you. It burned away everything false. It showed you that you could lose everything and still be okay. Better than okay. More alive. More real. But when you share this with someone who's still running from their pain, still numbing, still blaming, still convinced that life shouldn't hurt, they'll think you've Stockholm syndromed yourself. They'll say you're making excuses. They'll accuse you of toxic positivity because they haven't learned yet that pain and purpose can coexist, that you can acknowledge suffering is terrible and also acknowledge it can transform you. These aren't contradictions. They're both true. I understood this in my own philosophy. We're not purely rational beings. We're not meant to be. We're messy. We suffer. We struggle. And in that struggle, we become moral. We become human. The easy life teaches nothing. It's the hard one that makes us wise. And the fifth thing you should never tell someone who isn't spiritually awake: your relationship with something bigger than yourself. Maybe you call it God. Maybe you call it the universe. Source. Spirit. Consciousness. Love. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that you felt it. You've experienced grace. Moments when you knew you weren't alone. When synchronicities lined up so perfectly you couldn't call it coincidence. When you asked for help and help came in forms you never expected. You've developed a relationship with this presence. You pray, or you meditate, or you simply sit in silence and feel held. And this relationship is the most real thing in your life. More real than your job, or your bank account, or your social media feed. But when you share this with someone who sees the universe as random, mechanical, indifferent, when you tell them, I was guided, or I received a sign, or I felt divine love, they'll think you're delusional. They'll explain it away. Cognitive bias, wishful thinking, pattern recognition, anything but what it actually was. a genuine encounter with something greater than your individual self. And here's the painful part. You can't prove it to them. You can't make them feel what you felt. Spiritual experience is direct. It's personal. It's not transferable through argument or evidence. You either know it in your bones or you don't. I spent years trying to prove God through pure reason. I failed because God, or whatever we call this presence, isn't a logical conclusion. It's an experience, an opening, a grace. So when someone isn't ready, when they're still living in a world where only the material is real, where only what can be measured matters, don't try to convince them. You'll only exhaust yourself and make them more resistant. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Kant, this sounds elitist. Like I think I'm better than other people. No, listen, this isn't about superiority. This is about readiness. We're all on a journey. We all wake up in stages. What's obvious to you now was probably incomprehensible to you 5 years ago. You weren't stupid then. You weren't less valuable. You just hadn't lived enough, suffered enough, questioned enough to be ready. And the people around you who aren't spiritually awake yet, they're not lesser. They're not broken. They're exactly where they need to be in their journey. And maybe, probably, they know things you don't. Maybe they're awake in ways you're still sleeping. Spiritual awakening isn't a destination. It's not a badge you earn. It's a continuous process of seeing more clearly, feeling more deeply, living more authentically. Today's awakening is tomorrow's starting point. So when I say don't share these 5 things with people who aren't ready, I'm not saying judge them. I'm saying protect your truth, honor your journey, and wait for those rare, precious souls who can hold your deepest knowing with reverence instead of skepticism. Because when you find them, everything changes. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. You just share, and they say, yes, me too. And in that recognition, you're not alone anymore. You're home. I spent my whole life in one small city, but I learned that the most important journey isn't measured in miles. It's measured in depth. How deeply you're willing to question. How deeply you're willing to feel. How deeply you're willing to see yourself and others and this mysterious existence we're all part of. Don't let anyone make you small for having traveled deep. Don't let anyone shame you for seeing what they can't see yet. And don't exhaust yourself trying to drag people in a light they're not ready for. Instead, be the light. Live your truth so fully, so authentically, so joyfully that others become curious. Let your transformation speak for itself. Let your peace in chaos be the sermon. Let your compassion in conflict be the teaching. Because here's what I learned after all those years of thinking. You can't think your way into spiritual awakening. You can't argue someone into it. You can only live it. And when you do, when you really do, you become a beacon. And the people who are ready, who are searching, who are aching for something true, they'll find you. They'll ask questions. They'll be genuinely curious. They won't try to fix you or save you or explain you away. They'll simply say, teach me. And that's when you speak. That's when you share everything. Your transformations, your intuitive knowing, your experience of oneness, your understanding of suffering, your relationship with the sacred. Until then, guard your pearls, honor your path, and trust that everything unfolds exactly as it should. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 things have you learned not to share? What happened when you did? Drop a comment below. Let's build a community of people who understand this journey, who can speak freely without fear of judgment, who know that being spiritually awake isn't about being perfect. It's about being awake. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having the courage to wake up. And remember, your awakening doesn't need anyone's approval. It only needs your commitment. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious, stay open, and stay true to what you know in your bones is real.